7 in the morning. The alarm on the smartphone announces the start of a new school day. Masha, a 10th grade student, habitually reaches for her phone. The first 15 minutes are spent checking notifications in the school chat. Breakfast is accompanied by a tablet. She needs to review material for the test. At school, interactive whiteboards and presentations. After lessons, 3 hours of online courses to prepare for exams. In the evening, homework on an educational platform and video lectures. 10 hours of continuous interaction with screens. And so it goes every day. We were promised that digitalization would make education more accessible, more interesting, more effective. But reality turned out to be different. Instead of liberation from routine, electronic slavery. Instead of engaging learning, chronic eye and brain fatigue. Teachers note, children increasingly complain of headaches, sleep problems, loss of motivation. The paradox of digital education is that technologies designed to facilitate the learning process create a new form of exhaustion. The screen, from an assistant, turns into a tyrant, demanding constant attention. What is digital burnout? And how does it differ from ordinary academic stress? This condition is characterized not just by academic fatigue, but by deep emotional, physical, and cognitive exhaustion caused by constant interaction with digital devices in the educational process. Unlike traditional overwork, digital burnout has its unique features. The first stage begins with digital oversaturation, when the brain can no longer effectively filter information streams. Students describe this state as an information fog, when you read text on a screen but the meaning slips away. The second stage manifests through digital alienation, a paradoxical situation where a person is simultaneously dependent on gadgets and experiences aversion to them. In the third stage, digital exhaustion syndrome develops, a condition in which even short interaction with a screen causes physical discomfort, headache, eye strain, nausea. Neurobiologists note that constant digital stimulation depletes dopamine reserves, the neurotransmitter of pleasure and motivation. This explains why students with digital burnout lose interest in learning in general. Symptoms also include sleep disturbances, increased anxiety, and a special type of procrastination, when a student sits in front of a screen for hours but cannot bring themselves to start working. Numbers don't lie, and the statistics on digital education are deeply alarming. Before the pandemic, the average school child spent about 3 hours daily in front of a screen for educational purposes. Today, this figure has increased to 7 to 8 hours, and for students, it reaches 10 hours. A study conducted by the National Institutes of Health in 2022 showed that 86% of students exceed the recommended screen time norms by 1.5 to 2 times. The situation among younger school children is particularly concerning. If in 2018, only 20% of children aged 7 to 10 had their own digital devices for learning, now this figure has reached 73%. At the same time, the World Health Organization recommends that children of this age spend no more than 1.5 hours a day in front of screens. The reality, however, is that the average Russian primary school student spends about 4 hours daily in front of a screen, solely on educational tasks. The situation is exacerbated by the fact that 59% of educational platforms use mechanisms borrowed from the gaming industry: endless scrolling, reward systems, notifications that create an illusion of urgency. Research by neurobiologists from Stanford University confirms that the brain of a student in multitasking mode on online platforms experiences a load comparable to a 40-hour work week for an adult. It is not surprising that 64% of educators note a decrease in students' ability to maintain sustained attention after the mass transition to digital learning. Our brain was never designed for such intense digital load. Harvard University neurobiology professor David Eagleman compares the effect of excessive screen time on the teenage brain to the effect of constant muscle overexertion. First, accelerated growth, then exhaustion and atrophy. Cognitive changes occur imperceptibly but relentlessly. Studies show a disturbing trend. Students who spend more than 6 hours daily on educational platforms demonstrate a 22% decrease in working memory capacity. What happens on a neurobiological level? Constant digital stimulation leads to a thinning of gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, decision-making, and critical thinking. Simultaneously, the brain adapts to a mode of constant attention switching, losing the ability for deep concentration. Psychologist Adam Alter calls this cognitive overload, a state where the brain is constantly in a mode of superficial information processing, but cannot immerse itself in deep comprehension. Adolescents are particularly vulnerable, as their brains are undergoing critical stages of development. Neuroimaging studies show that excessive screen-based learning disrupts the formation of neural connections between the frontal and parietal lobes, key for the development of abstract thinking. We are literally changing the architecture of the younger generation's brains. Digital addiction is formed through the same mechanisms as any other. Educational applications use a system of instant rewards, likes, points, achievements, activating dopamine pathways in the brain. Every notification, every new piece of information triggers a microdose of dopamine. Over time, the brain demands more and more digital stimulation, losing the ability to derive pleasure from slow, non-digitized forms of learning. Man is a social being. We particularly keenly understand this simple truth when we are forced to limit live communication. Behind the computer screen grows a generation that can brilliantly solve online tests, but experiences panic when needing to speak in front of an audience. Research from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology shows students who spend more than 70% of their study time in a digital environment demonstrate a 34% decrease in nonverbal communication skills. They are worse at reading the emotions of an interlocutor, do not catch intonations, and lose the ability to maintain eye contact. Professor of social psychology Sherry Turkle calls this phenomenon the effect of digital empathic blindness, the inability to recognize emotional cues in real communication after prolonged immersion in a digital environment. Paradoxically, technologies designed to connect people create a new form of loneliness. 71% of students admit to experiencing anxiety when needing to work in an offline team, preferring individual assignments or virtual collaborations. Teachers note, children who grew up with online education often demonstrate tunnel social behavior. They are able to interact only in strictly defined, predictable situations, but are lost when needing to improvise in live communication. The phenomenon of digital loneliness in a crowd is particularly alarming. When a teenager, having hundreds of virtual contacts, feels deeply isolated in real life. Professor Jean Twenge, who studies Generation Z, provides shocking data. The level of clinical depression among teenagers who primarily receive online education is 46% higher than among their peers with traditional schooling. The digital environment creates the illusion of connection, but does not provide the depth of relationships necessary for emotional well-being. I've noticed that students are increasingly coming to class showing signs of exhaustion. Red eyes, inability to concentrate, constantly checking their phones, shares Elena Viktorovna, a Russian literature teacher with 30 years of experience. According to her observations, over the past 5 years, the average attention span of students has decreased from 40 to 15 minutes. Igor Petrovich, director of a Moscow gymnasium, notes, "We've encountered a paradox. Children are technically more literate than us, but cognitively weaker than their predecessors. They can open 20 tabs simultaneously, but can't finish reading one article." Elementary school teachers are sounding the alarm. Children, accustomed to vivid screen animations, are losing interest in regular books and real experiments. "I developed a system of digital breaks," says Anna, a biology teacher. "Every 20 minutes of working with tablets, we do a 5-minute gadget-free activity. The results are astonishing. Academic performance has increased by 18%. Professor of Pedagogy Mikhail Savelyev offers a radical solution. "At our university, we introduced digital detox days. Wednesday is completely screen-free. Lectures are on the blackboard, notes are in notebooks, discussions are live." Students initially resisted, but now admit it's the most productive day of the week. Digital burnout is not just fatigue, but a systemic restructuring of the psyche in response to continuous information overload, explains Maria Sokolova, a child psychologist with 20 years of experience. In her opinion, a child's brain is not evolutionarily prepared for such intense stimulation. Psychologists identify several defense mechanisms that form in students in response to digital overload. The first is digital dissociation, when a teenager psychologically detaches from the content they consume. They physically look at the screen, but are emotionally and cognitively absent. The second mechanism is compulsive switching, a constant change of activities without completing previous tasks. The third is information apathy, a state where new knowledge was via no emotional response. Doctor of Psychological Sciences Alexander Vetrov notes a paradoxical fact. "We observe the formation of addiction to digital learning, even in children who do not derive pleasure from it. This is a special type of addiction, not from pleasure, but from avoiding discomfort." Psychologists recommend specific steps for preventing digital burnout. The 5-10-15 method involves a 5-minute break every 30 minutes of screen time, a 10-minute walk every 2 hours, and 15 minutes of physical activity after each study block. It is also important to create digital-free oases, spaces and periods of time completely free from electronic devices. The global scientific community is actively studying the impact of digital technologies on the educational process. A longitudinal study by the University of Oxford, lasting 8 years, tracked the cognitive development of 3,000 schoolchildren from 12 countries. The results were mixed. With moderate use of digital tools, up to 2 hours daily, an improvement in information processing skills of 15% was observed. However, exceeding the 4-hour threshold led to a 23% decrease in the ability for deep reading and a 17% decrease in analytical thinking. The differences between educational systems are particularly indicative. In Finland, where digital technologies are introduced in a measured way and complement traditional learning, the level of digital burnout among students is only 19%. In South Korea, known for its high-tech educational system, this figure reaches 63%. Japanese researchers from the University of Tokyo discovered the phenomenon of digital amnesia in students, where information received exclusively through screens is less well retained in long-term memory. The international project Digital Childhood, uniting scientists from 22 countries, revealed a correlation between time spent on educational platforms and the development of emotional intelligence. Each additional hour of daily online learning reduces empathy scores by 2.5%. This explains why in countries with moderate digitalization of education, the level of social adaptation among graduates remains consistently high. Modern educational platforms are not just learning tools. They are meticulously designed engagement systems, created using the same psychological principles employed in social media and computer games. The architecture of these platforms deliberately fosters addictive behavior. Infinite scrolling of materials, vibrant notifications, rating and achievement systems. All these elements are borrowed from the gaming industry for a reason. Studies show the average educational portal utilizes up to 23 psychological triggers that stimulate dopamine production. Gamification of learning was initially presented as a way to increase student motivation. However, psychologists are sounding the alarm. Systems of points, badges, and achievements do not cultivate a healthy interest in knowledge, but rather an addiction to external rewards. Students admit, "I do assignments not to learn something new, but to get another virtual medal." Algorithms that create an illusion of urgency and incompleteness are particularly dangerous. Flashing icons, countdown timers, notifications that your classmates have already completed the assignment, all this generates a constant sense of anxiety and fear of missing out. Neurobiologists confirm a student's brain, constantly receiving such signals, is in a state of chronic stress, which blocks the ability for deep learning. Developers of educational platforms rarely speak about this publicly, but their business model directly depends on the time users spend in the system. The longer a student stays online, the more data is collected about them and the higher the monetization. In search of a way out of the digital labyrinth, educational institutions worldwide are experimenting with alternative approaches. The Finnish digital diet model is attracting specialists' attention due to its effectiveness. Helsinki schools have implemented an alternating practice. 2 days of active technology use are followed by a day of complete digital detox. The results are impressive. A 32% reduction in student anxiety levels and an 18% increase in academic performance within 1 academic year. Hybrid educational models are becoming the golden mean. The Danish system suggests using the, quote, 40% of the time is traditional learning without gadgets, 40% is interactive with limited technology use, and 20% is fully digital. Germany has gone even further, legally limiting the daily use of digital devices in schools to 2 hours for children under 14. In the American state of Vermont, the Quote 2 program successfully operates. Weekly school days conducted entirely outdoors, without access to electronic devices. Teachers note that after such sessions, children's ability to concentrate increases by 40%. Singapore's experience with its digital credits system is interesting. Each student receives a limited amount of time to work with electronic devices, which they can use at their discretion. This teaches conscious consumption of digital content. International studies confirm that educational systems combining high technologies with traditional methods demonstrate better results both in academic performance and in the psychological well-being of students. How to cope with digital overload and bring back the joy of learning. We offer a practical checklist to help you avoid burnout and maintain balance. First, set technological boundaries. Use the 25-20 rule. After 20 minutes of screen time, take a 5-minute break, looking at a distance of at least 20 meters. Set your smartphone to Do Not Disturb mode while doing homework. Turn off all notifications from educational apps. Check them at your own initiative, not at the behest of algorithms. Second, create a physical space for learning without gadgets. Designate a corner in your room where all screens are forbidden. Use paper textbooks and notebooks for jotting down key ideas. Neuroscientists confirm handwritten notes are remembered 30% better than typed ones. Third, practice digital detox. Dedicate at least one day a week when you completely abstain from screens. Replace online communication with classmates with real-life meetings. Organize offline groups for exam preparation. Collaborative learning in real space is significantly more effective than virtual rooms. Fourth, restore concentration through the deep immersion technique. Start with 15 minutes of uninterrupted work on a single task without switching to other tabs or applications. Gradually increase this time to 45 minutes. Use a timer to track progress. Fifth, return to nature. Research shows even 20 minutes of walking in a park restores the brain's cognitive resources after intense digital load. Do some assignments outdoors. Read paper books in the park, solve problems in a notebook. Sixth, practice mindfulness. Before each entry into the digital educational environment, ask yourself, what specific task do I want to solve? Set a timer for the planned work time. Upon completion, pause and evaluate the result. The future of education will inevitably be digital, but exactly how depends on the decisions we make today. Leading experts agree, technological progress cannot and should not be stopped, but its direction can and should be adjusted. Linda Darling-Hammond, professor of educational technology at Stanford University, predicts, in the next 5 years, we will see a revolution in the design of educational platforms. Addictive mechanisms will be replaced by systems based on the principles of cognitive ergonomics. Maximum efficiency with minimal brain strain. This transformation is already beginning. The new generation of educational applications eschews endless scrolling and constant notifications in favor of clear timeframes and conscious interaction. The international consortium Digital Well-Being in Education is developing the first ethical standards for educational technologies, where the main criterion is not engagement, but student well-being. World education leaders, Finland, Singapore, Canada, are already implementing the principle of technological balance as the basis of national educational strategies. Their experience shows the future lies in hybrid models, where digital tools complement but do not replace live interaction. The key factor is not the quantity of technology, but the quality of its integration into the educational process. As neuroscientist and educator Manfred Spitzer noted, we must design digital education based on how the brain works, not on how algorithms work. This means creating technologies that enhance natural cognitive processes, not distort them. The future of education is not just new devices and platforms. It is a new philosophy of human-technology interaction, based on a deep understanding of what makes us human.